Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I'm Dr. Joseph. Thank you so much for watching me on YouTube and on Instagram. We are still talking about the language of justice because it's important to make sure that we frame and discuss issues using the right language, using the right kind of terminology, because we don't want to confuse people and we don't want to give people any wiggle room to avoid the real issues and the real problems. And so we got to make sure that when we talk about anything that's going on that we feel like is unjust, or any injustice that seems to be occurring, that we use the right language. And so on this episode, I want to just talk quickly about the idea of equality versus equity. Equality and equity. I think that people believe wrongly that these two words mean the same thing. And so when you start talking about what's needed, people start getting confused or they start to willfully do the wrong thing because they can find some way around it with the language. So, for instance, when you talk about equality, equality is the idea that everything is the same and everyone is treated exactly the same way. And so, obviously, when we were growing up, if you're my age in the 80s, 90s, or even before then, 50s, 60s, 70s, equality was the thing because people were clearly being treated unequally, right? So, we're trying to fight for civil rights, voting rights. We're trying to get things done in a way so that everybody is treated exactly the same. And that was the point. And that was why people were marching and protesting and fighting and petitioning because we weren't being treated equally. And so we wanted to be treated equally. And that's fine. And ultimately, that's what you want to have. We want everybody to be treated the same way. We don't want to be having these class divisions, these racial divides. And if you're a part of one group, you get more than if you do if you're a part of another group. In the end, that's what we all want. And so fighting for that, there's no problem. There's no problem at all. We're trying to all be equal. But here's the thing, when you start talking about it now in 2024, in an era where there are people who are trying to correct the wrongs of the past and correct the injustices of the past and trying to actually create a society where we're all treated equally, you know what happens. People say you're starting to give preferential treatment to certain groups and certain individuals. They're starting to say, hey, that policy treats them differently than it treats the rest of us. That's not right. That's not equal. I thought you wanted equality. And so people can willfully miss the reasons why things are being done or pushed for a certain way now than they were way back then when it was clear and obvious that there were injustices occurring and that people were being treated unfairly consistently. And so now in 2024, we have to talk about equity. Equity. That's the word that we have to use because equity means that we're not just doing the same thing for everyone. Equity recognizes that we're all in different places because of the inequality of the past, because of all the issues in the past, and that we have to do things in targeted, specific ways to ensure that we can get everyone to an equal playing field, an equal level, so that they can actually achieve what they're trying to achieve, which is ultimately equality for everyone. So now we know that those racist policies in the past, those xenophobic policies of the past, the ways in which people were mistreated and unequally protected have led to certain circumstances where people are not starting from the same place. Different health disparities, economic disparities, educational disparities, they all exist. Housing disparities, they all exist because we as a society, particularly in America, but I'm sure this is all over, we have taken certain groups of people, given them all the resources, all the things that they want, and we've left people behind, or we've deliberately oppressed people so they couldn't achieve the same things that this other group has. So, for instance, in America, it looks like housing where you draw a red line on a map, and below that line, you don't get home loans, you don't get access, you don't get opportunities. And so you're relegated to certain parts of a town, certain parts of a city, whereas people in other parts who look a certain way get to have whatever they need to buy the home that they want to have and build wealth. And so those racist policies in the past have contributed to disparities in the present. And so now is not the time to say, okay, we recognize that that was wrong. Let's just treat everybody equally, all the same. That's not how that works. You have to actually actively repair the damage that you've done with those policies. And that requires you to do a little bit more for the people who you did a lot less for in the past. That's equity. And that's what we need to talk about. When you are on the front line, when you are pressing someone to correct something that's been wrong, don't ask for equality. Not now. Ask for equity. You tell that person, you tell that group, you tell that mayor, you tell whoever it is that what you actually need are these types of resources so that we, this group, this community, can have the equal opportunity that it was not afforded in the past. Don't settle for, well, we're going to do everything the same for everybody because we don't want anybody to get upset. No, no. You did something egregious. You need to actively correct it by investing more than everywhere else because they're fine. Invest more here and more there so that we can now have the equal opportunity, the equal access. We can remove the disparities, remove the unequal way we've been doing things in the past, and finally be on the same footing. That's what we need to do. And so, not equality, not equality, equity. We need equity. We need to push and fight for equity. That's what needs to happen. The easiest example for me, being an environmental engineer, is infrastructure. It's really simple. So, there's certain communities where the infrastructure is old, it's been neglected, and because it's a black community, it's an immigrant community, it's an indigenous community, the people in power had no interest in helping that community maintain any level of security with their infrastructure. Think about the water pipes. Pipes are old. Water coming out is contaminated. You drink contaminated water. You're getting sick. You have issues because of the lack of investment in the infrastructure. And so, if you think about that happening for decades, decades, you can't come now in 2024 and say, well, mm, let's just make sure we provide equal funding for all of our neighborhoods in this city and that everybody has the same amount of funding available to do repairs. It's not going to work because one community was neglected for so long that they need additional funding to actually repair their system. That's what they need. And that's why you, as a decision maker, you, as the person with the power to allocate funds, needs to invest more in that area than these other areas because they need it more. They've been neglected for longer. They have more issues associated with that problem of having no running water that's clean and palatable. And so you need to do something about that in particular, specifically. Equity. That's what that is. That's equity. It's not equality because the equality comes in where the water is clean for everybody. And to get to that point, you need to have the same level of infrastructure across the board. However, because you've neglected this part of town and not this part of town. This part of town needs more investment than that part of town. And that goes for any disparity, any issue that we see in our society. We need equity to close these disparity gaps, to address long standing racial, ethnic, gendered inequality in our society. We need all of that. That's what we need. And so when you're talking about these things, when you are trying to figure out what to ask for, what you need to thrive, don't look around and ask for the same thing that everybody else has. Do your own assessment, do your own evaluation, and say, listen, this is what we actually need to get to where we want to go. This is what we actually need to be able to thrive and to be able to provide what we need for our families. This is what we need. And just because another community doesn't need as much, we do. And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in saying we need more. You've neglected us for this long. We're speaking out now, and we need more. That's what you have to do. And as you continue to fight, keep that in mind. Keep the language correct. Because after MLK Day, everybody's ready to say, hey, don't ask for more than the rest of us. Don't ask for additional assistance because Martin Luther King Jr. said we should all be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin. And he did say that, but he said it in the context of people being grossly mistreated because of the color of their skin, not because they were trying to get additional resources because of the color of their skin. And so we can't fall into the trap of accepting quote unquote equal when we need more because more has been done to damage our communities. And so in the justice world, I need you to ask for equity. I need you to demand equity and justice. And the result of that should be equality. But don't ask for equal resources now when you haven't had that for decades and decades and you need more additional support to move forward. Don't do that. Just don't do it. And so that's it for me. There'll be more about this on the podcast, but thanks for watching. Y'all have a great day. See ya. Okay, you probably noticed, but I'm sweating a lot right now. I'm in the USC production studio in the basement of the library. The air conditioning is out, and it is hot in this place. Um, you see all this sweat? I mean, this is just too much. So next time we're getting a different location. I don't know where, but we gotta do something because I can't be sweating up like this too much longer. It's not gonna work. See you next time. Just not from here.